morning, everyone. We have a very special piece this morning presented by Carmen Norman along with Dr. Gary Smart on piano. Carmen studies vocal performance in opera, and she will be performing the piece Waldein Samkeit, a German song by Max Reger. Take it away, Carmen and Gary. Cameron and Gary, that was beautiful. This morning's opening words are by Marge Piercy. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who stand in the line and haul in their places, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn, are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. Now, before we sing our opening hymn, we're going to hear a testimonial for the March Stewardship Month. I invite Madeline Sims, our board secretary, up to the pulpit to share a few words.
Good morning, everyone. So it is said that you get more out of something the more you put into it. And for me, joining BBUUC 11 years ago was definitely a shift in my priorities from how I spent most of my early adulthood. I was unchurched from the time I was about 15, and it was really not until I was approaching the big milestone birthday of 30 that I kind of wanted to connect with a community that was outside of my coworkers and my jobs. That's something that really had kind of consumed my life up until that point. And I had heard about Unitarian Universalism as a teenager, and for me, that was always a church, if I ever did go to one, that I would decide I would join. So seeking out a UU church was definitely on my bucket list as I was approaching my 30th year of life. But when I first joined the church, I will be honest, I never could have seen myself as involved as I have become over the years. And along my journey here, I have been so blessed to have been mentored by so many different leaders who are dynamic and who have inspired me and who have definitely helped me grow as a person. I've learned from their example of what it takes to be a strong leader, and I think I've developed my own skills in handling difficult situations. And for me personally, you know, I commit my time to this church, the finances, to this beloved community because it has given me so much. It has definitely challenged me. It's made me work on my own weaknesses, and it has allowed me to grow. So, and for me, you know, I want this church and this community to be here decades from now for other people like myself who were kind of far away from family and wanting to seek out that community. So that's why I'm still as involved and passionate about this community that I love.
Thank you, Madeline. Good morning again, everyone. My name is Hannalora Chapple, and I will be your youth worship leader this morning. Welcome to Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, or to say in a much easier fashion, BBUUC. We are so delighted to have you with us this morning. What drew me into this church was the openness of it, the support, the community. When I walked through the front doors, members walked up and talked to my family, and I instantly, it felt like we were old friends. Unlike many other churches we had visited prior, the people here weren't looking for money or consumption. They were looking for friendships, for laughs, and for conversations. For any first-time visitors, guests, or even you, members of BBUUC, I hope that we share this experience and create it for others. If you are new here, please feel free to pick up a name tag at our welcome table over by the entryway so that we may get to know you by name. And while you're there, feel free to pick up some information about our church and our denomination. If you would like to know more about Unitarian Universalism, we also offer regular Learn About Us classes. After the service, we invite everyone here to join us in the backs of the sanctuary for coffee, snacks, and conversations. I now ask that everyone please make sure that you silence your electronic devices for a distraction-free service. And I skipped over a part for our opening hymn, so we will be doing that now. I would like to invite our song leaders up to guide us in singing our opening hymn, number 318, We Would Be One. We will be singing both verses. please recite the Congregational Covenant along with me. These words can be found in your order of service. We covenant to engage one another with honesty, kindness, and respect, to value diversity, seek understanding of our differences, and practice gracious accountability with care, love, and empathy. We make these promises to those who are here and those yet to come, so that we may be a safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. And now please rise and body your spirit to sing our call to worship. The words can also be found in your order of service. We light our chalice each morning as a symbol of our faith. I now invite Elizabeth DeCou to come forward to light the chalice as I read the words of Paul Sprecher. We light this chalice in memory of the courage of those who have struggled for freedom, the persistence of those who've struggled for justice, and the love of those who've built beloved communities to carry on the light of hope. Thank you, Elizabeth. I now invite Reverend Carmen Emerson up to tell our time for all ages.
Good morning, everyone. So I need your help today in telling this story in a time for all ages. So when I go like this with my right hand, I need you to say, "Not my problem." Let's practice. Not my problem. Wow, the inflection. Okay. And now when I point at you with my left hand, I need you to say, "Someone." Someone. Not my problem. Someone. We've got it. Okay, thank you. Once upon a time, a queen sat on her balcony eating rice cakes and honey with her chief advisor. As they ate, they gazed down at the busy street below. The queen pointed to something in the distance, and as she did, a drop of honey from her rice cake landed on the balcony railing. "My queen, you have spilled a drop of honey," observed the advisor. "Shall I call a servant to come and clean it up?" But the queen laughed. "A little drop of honey is not my problem. Someone will clean it later." They went on eating and talking as the drop of honey warmed in the sun and began to slowly drip down the side of the railing until it landed in the street below with a plop. "Your Highness," the advisor said, "that drop of honey has now fallen into the street where it is attracting flies. Shouldn't we call a servant to come and clean it up?" But again the queen yawned lazily and replied, "A little drop of honey and a few flies are not my problem. And besides, someone will deal with it later." Soon a lizard darted out from underneath the palace wall and began to catch the flies on her tongue. Then a cat sprang out of the baker's shop and began to bat the lizard back and forth like a toy. Just then a dog charged out of the butcher's shop and began to bite the cat on the neck. "Your Highness," the advisor implored, "now the flies have attracted a lizard, which attracted a cat, which is now being attacked by a dog. Shouldn't we call someone to stop the fight?" But the queen only stretched again and shook her head at her advisor. "Won't you relax? A silly animal fight is not my problem. We'll surely see to it." And in fact, the baker did see to it. She saw the dog attacking her cat and ran out with her rolling pin and began to hit the dog. And then the butcher heard his dog howling and ran out with his broom and began to hit the cat. And soon baker and the butcher were hitting each other. Then the neighboring shopkeepers began to take sides, joining in the fight. Then some soldiers came along, but some knew the butcher and some knew the baker. So the soldiers too took sides, and the battle grew. It grew and it grew until a great battle waged in the streets. People were throwing rocks through windows and tipping over the vendor carts. Someone picked up a torch from the wall and hurled it through a window. Fire raged, and eventually it spread to the palace. The next thing they knew, the queen and her advisor were being escorted down a ladder from the balcony into the street below because the palace itself was in flames. Later that day, when the fire had died out, the queen and her advisor surveyed the ruins of their land. Suddenly, the queen stopped in the street underneath where her balcony had been. She reached down and touched a small puddle on the ground. "It's honey," she said, remembering. "I guess I should have cleaned up that drop of honey in the first place. Now my whole kingdom has been lost because of it." The queen realized in that moment that she, in fact, was who could have made a difference all those steps along the way. And that was the last time the queen ever said, "Not my problem." From then on, when the queen was tempted to think or to say, "Not my problem," instead she reminded herself, "I am someone." Thank you.
Singing
opportunity to support this congregation. You may choose to place your offering in the plates, or if you choose an alternative method, you can visit our website at bbuuc.org and click the donate link. Whether you choose to donate or not, I ask that you please participate in the ritual of the passing of the plates. However you choose to give, these donations will be greatly received. Once the offering has been completed, please rise and body your spirit to sing our offertory hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life. I now invite Helen Meat and John Riddington to come forward to accept the offerings. The moment you have all been waiting for. I would like to invite Reverend Carmen Emerson, BBUUC's affiliated community minister, as she brings her final Second Sunday Spirit in Practice. This sermon is titled Justice Practices.
Now, when I heard Cameron practicing before the service, that was the moment I was waiting for. Thank you. It was beautiful. Today's service opened with To Be of Use, a poem published by Marge Piercy in 1973. I have loved that poem for years. I love the sentiment of it. I follow Marge Piercy on Facebook, read stories about her very ordinary life in Vermont, as she writes poems, teaches other poets, and with her partner, Woody, tends their garden, cooks meals for their many welcomed guests, cares for their beloved cats, and reflects on the news of the world. A good life. A few days ago, more than 50 years after To Be of Use was published, Ms. Piercy posted this on her Facebook page. The news is so depressing on all fronts that sometimes it gives me a stomachache. But I feel a duty to keep up with it Even ostriches don't actually bury their heads in the sand. While I'm alive, I have to do what little I can at my age. Can't march anymore. Can write. I invite you to take her words to heart, all of them, and to keep them in mind as we progress through today's final sermon in our second Sunday Spirit and Practice series about justice practices. As I've said in the beginning of each one of these worship services, our purpose has been to consider together different spiritual practices that help us to examine and strengthen and deepen our UU spirituality, our UU ethics, our UU identity, and our UU faith as people practicing with integrity a covenantal religious tradition rather than a creedal or doctrinal one. We are a people of faith who understand that when these four threads of spirituality, ethics, identity, and faith are woven together, we are stronger and healthier for that individually and as a community of faith. And so, a final review. Our UU spirituality is about our reverence for the interdependence of life, of which we are all a part. Our relationship with the Spirit of life, that profound connection with transcending mystery and wonder, imagined and known by many names and faces throughout the world. Our UU ethics is about our ability to act on our shared moral values and teach our children by example that we are moral agents capable of making a difference in the lives of other people, that our choices matter to us and will make a difference in the lives of others too, that our choices have consequences in the here and now, and therefore accountability is part of moving through the world with integrity and grace. Our UU ethics help us to choose wisely. Our UU ethics remind us that we are someone, as we heard about in this morning's story. Our Unitarian Universalist identity is our knowledge of, our understanding of, and our connection to the values, stories, symbols, history, theology, polity, and practices of Unitarian Universalism, an evolving and living faith tradition, never complete and never perfect. Our UU faith is about recognizing and understanding ourselves and one another as interdependent meaning makers who freely and intentionally choose to be in covenantal relationship with one another as we seek to fulfill our vision and live into our mission as this UU congregation. Because we can have such misunderstandings about covenant, I want to emphasize this about being in covenantal relationships. They cannot be forced, and they must be tended. Such tending is why we remind ourselves of our congregational covenant every time we gather for worship or other events essential to the life of this congregation. Covenant is commitment to the kind of person you want to be, the kind of community we want to be, the kind of difference we want to make in the world as promise making, promise breaking, promise renewing, promise keeping someone's. Covenant is at the heart of our faith, the place where living our professed values with integrity connects individual to individual, creates community, and connects our community to the larger world. With that review, we have come to the final circle in our wheel, justice practices, and perhaps that is because all the other practices we've considered, personal and communal practices, spiritual partnerships, mind, body, and soul practices, and life practices, perhaps all of these other practices are essential prelude to justice practices because justice practices are where the rubber meets the road. As my colleague, Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom writes, a fully mature spirituality does not stop at the goal of transforming oneself, That's the internal work that we do with all of the spiritual practices that we've talked about and considered so far. A fully mature spirituality does not stop at the goal of transforming oneself, but must extend beyond oneself to others and include a vision of transforming the world. Transformation is important to us, so important that you instinctively, wisely, hopefully, intentionally, purposely named transformation in our congregational covenant as why we make the commitments we do. Look at the final line of our covenant. So that we may be a safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. That is our why. Strength, depth, and clarity in our UU spirituality, ethics, identity, and faith give us internal fortitude for external actions in service to transformation, so that we are prepared never to simply be a bystander when our values, our conscience, our integrity, and our love call us to speak up or show up or both in whatever ways we can. Rumi says there are a million ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Piercy says, while I'm alive, I have to do what little I can. As we consider justice practices and transformation, let us remember that love must be at the center. The amazing Bell Hooks reflects on the intersection of love, spiritual practices, justice work, and transformation with this powerful observation. She writes, I am often struck by the dangerous narcissism fostered by spiritual rhetoric that pays so much attention to individual self-improvement and so little attention to the practice of love within the context of community. Love must be at the center. So I want to bring this from the abstract to the concrete with a true story. Long ago and far away, a member of the congregation I was serving would talk to me after social justice sermons where I felt like I had just preached my heart out, hoping to move members into action. And yet the congregation would remain absolutely reticent about engaging in any kind of collective social justice work. They took for granted that someone would take care of things, like the Queen in this morning's Time for All Ages story. Such things don't concern us until they do. So this congregant would say to me, you preached pretty words. I know they mean something to you, and I know you want them to mean something to me, but I don't know what you're trying to tell me. Why should it matter to me? How do you want me to respond? I'm trying to tell you the world is on fire and that we are among the someones who can do something about it. That we are called to be those someones by the values and the covenant we share, and that we prepare to be those someones by the spiritual practices that tend our UU spirituality, ethics, identity, and faith individually and collectively. I'm trying to tell you that if we have clarity about our why, then we'll have no choice than to figure out and commit to how we must respond. Why is that internal reflective work we do? How is the external work we do? And as a congregation, they intersect as mission. With the benefit of time and the wisdom of experience, I have come to understand that what felt like preaching my heart out to me landed as scolding and shaming to a congregation in which so many people were focused on the preservation of their historic sanctuary. They felt so responsible for what they had inherited. That was their why for being a UU congregation. My why was different. So not only were our whys different, the truth is that I did not understand as a new minister what I now know to be true. We cannot be scolded or shamed into change. We must be loved into evolution. We cannot be scolded or shamed into change. We must be loved into evolution. It's what Bell Hooks was talking about when she said we have to practice love in the context of community. There is more to this true story, but before I go any further with it, let me offer a trigger warning that I'm now going to talk about Michael Brown and the events of Ferguson, Missouri in the fall of 2014. As you may remember, Michael Brown was an African-American teenager shot and killed by Officer Darren Wilson, a Ferguson, Missouri police officer. In the wake of despair and sense of nihilism experienced by that community, local clergy of Ferguson and surrounding St. Louis houses of faith invited clergy from around the country to participate in a protest march rooted in a theology of resistance to decades-long practices of oppression by law and justice authorities in the local municipalities of Ferguson and the surrounding areas of Ferguson. This was a justice practice that called me to be more than a bystander. My conscience and my UU values were clear about the action I needed to take. I clearly felt the why of my UU values and was invited into a collective ecumenical how. A member of my congregation and I drove 12 hours to Ferguson, participated in and witnessed the events of the week, including this peaceful protest at the Ferguson police station, where we stood face to face with police officers in the pouring rain for 4 hours, the same amount of time that Michael Brown's body had been left in the street in the August heat. That's me on the far left. You can tell by that little pointed chin peeking out from under my raincoat, and I can tell by this Chalice stole. See how puckered it is? It's never been the same since it was soaked on that October day, but then neither have I. Our social justice actions that week occurred within the context of a community practicing love. I was in brave company, and those moments were made possible by what happened the evening before when we gathered in the auditorium of a local university to hear the community's faith leaders talk about why our presence mattered and how we were going to try to make a difference. They reminded us that each of us was someone, and together we were going to engage in a collective justice practice. Cornel West was on the stage, and also Jim Wallace. People knew them, and also Reverend Tracy Blackman and other prestigious Black leaders, including the new young president of the NAACP. As they spoke successively, each speech grew a little longer, a little more impassioned, but here's where the audience of people were changed, prepared, encouraged, loved into evolution by example. A young African-American man in the crowd had had enough of the pretty speeches and began to lash out verbally, swearing with great physical animation. There was literal pearl clutching in the row ahead of me. A couple who look a lot like me told me they came to hear Cornel West speak, but they had not come to be threatened by an angry Black man. That was not part of their why or their how. That young man grew louder. People were moving away, yelling, pointing at him. People were making their way towards him. Police were making their way towards him. But before they could get there, one of the speakers had jumped off the stage, run across the floor, climbed over the railing, and reached the young man before the police got to them. He and we understood the danger that young man was in. The sprinter spread his arms to hold back the police. "Wait," he said, "wait. Just let me hear him." This startled the young man into silence. It startled all of us into silence. And then he went from this defensive posture of holding back the police to reaching out to the young man who stepped forward, collapsed into that older black man's arms and began to cry. We witnessed a justice practiced in action. We experienced evolution by love as Reverend Osejifu Seku, this diminutive older black man with dreadlocks, impeccably dressed in a three-piece suit, held this desperate, sobbing young man who said to him, "We are being shot in the streets, and you're all here in this safe auditorium trying to outdo each other's speeches, but your speeches cannot stop a bullet." The next day, we organized in the Wellspring Church and then walked several miles to the Ferguson police station and then stood in the rain for all those hours, praying together, singing together, transformed and transforming together, being someone's together. Encouraged in our justice practice, our whys and our hows, having found common ground, more determined than scared, loved into evolution. Like Marge Piercy, I cannot do now what I was able to do 10 years ago, but I also cannot stick my head in the sand, pretend that all that needs to be done to effect justice and peace in our world of fire is someone else's to do. Cannot ignore my UU values that make the why clear and our UU covenant that makes the how clear. Cannot ignore that I am still in good and brave and loving company with a room full of someones with whom I can engage in justice practices as I can, while I can, as we can, while we can. 19th century Unitarian minister Edward Everett Hale once wrote, "I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do." As we pause for a few minutes so that you can have conversation with one another about justice practices, may Hale's words inspire you. The insert in today's order of service has 20 quotes about justice practices, and maybe one of them will resonate with you about a someone you have been or hope to be. So take a few minutes, find someone. Before we break into this, could we all take a good deep breath together? Thank you. So take a few minutes, look over these quotes about spiritual justice, social justice, spiritual practices. I hope you find someone interesting to talk to, and I'll ring us back together with the chime in a few minutes, okay? Thank you for participating in that activity. I appreciate that you've done that through all of these sermon series, sharing your stories and your insights, your curiosities, your discoveries with me, with one another. Thank you so much for bringing your goodwill and your cooperation to this sermon series. Before we rise in body or in spirit to sing our closing hymn, I want to close this series with a favorite meditation and prayer by theologian Ted Loder, who says, "Empower me to be a bold participant rather than a timid saint in waiting in the difficult ordinariness of now, to exercise the authority of honesty rather than to defer to power or deceive to get it, to influence some for justice rather than impress anyone for gain, and by grace to find treasures of joy, of friendship, of peace, hidden in the fields of the daily you give me to plow. May it be so, and may we be so together in the loving context of this faith community of someone's. Amen." Would you please rise in body or in spirit as we join our voices together in singing our closing hymn, number 118, "This Little Light of Mine."
would like to call Elizabeth Decoux back up to extinguish our flame. As we depart from this service, I leave you with these words from James 1. Be doers of the word and not merely hearers. Those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act. They will be blessed with their doing. May it be so.